In 2005, survival horror changed forever. Resident Evil 4 didn't just redefine its franchise, it reshaped the entire gaming industry. Over the shoulder aiming, relentless pacing, and cinematic presentation became the new standard, influencing everything from Gears of War to The Last of Us. But how did this one game, born from chaos and multiple failed prototypes, become a modern classic? And my favorite game of all time. Today, we're looking back at Resident Evil 4, its history, its impact, and its enduring legacy. Resident Evil 4's road to release was anything but smooth. After the massive success of Resident Evil 2 and 3, Capcom wanted a fresh direction. Shinji Mikami, the series creator, tasked Hideki Kamiya with making a bold new sequel. What Kamiya delivered looked incredible, but it wasn't Resident Evil. That prototype eventually became Devil May Cry, the stylish action game that spawned its own franchise. But Capcom didn't stop there. Over the next few years, several more versions of RE4 were attempted. The Fog version leaned heavily on atmosphere and supernatural elements. And, of course, the famous Hookman build featured Leon hallucinating terrifying phantoms while exploring eerie mansions. Each of these experiments pushed the series forward in some way, but none of them felt quite right. By 2003, Mikami took the project into his own hands. He stripped away the supernatural, focused on grounded threats, and emphasized action without losing tension. What emerged was bold, risky, and unlike anything fans had seen before. Resident Evil 4 officially launched on January 11, 2005 as a GameCube exclusive. The game was an instant success. Critics hailed it as revolutionary, praising its over-the-shoulder camera, cinematic presentation, and razor-sharp pacing. At release, it earned near-perfect scores across the board, with many outlets calling it one of the greatest games ever made. On Metacritic, it landed a staggering 96 out of 100, cementing its place among the highest-rated titles of all time. But why is that, you may be asking yourself? Well, let's start off with the story. At its core, Resident Evil 4 tells a simple story. Leon S. Kennedy, now a US government agent, is tasked with rescuing Ashley Graham, the president's daughter, from a remote European village. But that straightforward mission quickly unravels into something much darker. The villagers aren't ordinary people. They're under the control of Las Plagas, a parasite that turns them into fanatical soldiers of the Los Illuminados cult. The plot unfolds across three distinct acts: the isolated village, the Gothic castle, and the militarized island. Each location escalates both the stakes and the scale of the threat, from tense skirmishes in farmland to massive set-piece battles against grotesque bioweapons. Beneath the action, Resident Evil 4 explores recurring series themes: the loss of humanity through biological experimentation, the dangers of unchecked power, and the resilience of individuals against overwhelming odds. Leon's dry humor and confidence
No thanks, bro.
balance the tension, while Ashley's vulnerability gives the player something tangible to protect. The villains, whether it's Salazar's theatrical cruelty, Krauser's betrayal, or Sadler's cultish ambition, embody different aspects of control and corruption. It's campy, yes, but that works in its favor. That's the magic. Resident Evil 4 never takes itself too seriously, and yet it delivers a memorable, high-stakes adventure that feels both like a Hollywood action film and a survival horror thrill ride.
Bit of advice, try using knives next time. Works better for close encounters.
Biggest innovation Resident Evil 4 introduced was its camera. Instead of the fixed cinematic angles of earlier games, Shinji Mikami placed the camera directly over Leon's shoulder. It seems obvious now, but in 2005, this was groundbreaking. It gave players the precision of a third-person shooter while preserving the deliberate pacing and vulnerability of survival horror. That single design choice redefined not just Resident Evil, but action horror games as a whole. Capcom also designed enemies specifically to exploit this new perspective. The Ganados weren't the slow, shambling zombies of the past. They were villagers infected by Las Plagas, still capable of speech, coordination, and unnerving intelligence. They dodged attacks, set up ambushes, picked up weapons, and swarmed the player in terrifying numbers. For the first time in the series, enemies felt like hunters instead of prey, forcing players to stay mobile and rethink every encounter. Ammo management remained crucial, but combat now offered layers of strategy. Shooting a villager in the leg could stagger them, opening them up for Leon's brutal roundhouse kick. Targeting arms could disarm enemies wielding axes or crossbows, while aiming for the head risked triggering something far worse, parasites erupting from their necks, transforming them into even deadlier threats. This dynamic created a constant tension between efficiency, risk, and survival instincts. The infamous village siege in the opening hour is still hailed as one of the most intense introductions in gaming history, with players trapped in claustrophobic houses, windows shattering, ladders crashing against walls, and the roar of Dr. Salvador's chainsaw closing in. The game forces you to improvise or die, barricading doors with furniture, pushing ladders away from windows, and finding vantage points to survive the onslaught made the experience feel alive in a way no scripted cutscene ever could. It wasn't just about fear, it was about resourcefulness under pressure. And Resident Evil 4 didn't stop there. Its pacing constantly shifted between high tension and explosive set pieces, from escorting Ashley through deadly gauntlets to battling colossal monsters that blurred the line between horror and action spectacle. Each encounter tested players in new ways, ensuring the game never felt repetitive despite its length. By blending precision shooting, environmental interaction, and relentless enemy design, Resident Evil 4 didn't just evolve survival horror, it redefined modern action games altogether. Resident Evil 4 was also one of the most cinematic games of its era. Quick-time events, love them or hate them, kept players engaged during cutscenes rather than passively watching. They blurred the line between film and gameplay, demanding constant attention even when the controller was usually at rest. The Krauser knife fight in particular remains a pulse-pounding showcase of what the system could do. Every button press determined Leon's survival, turning what could have been a simple cutscene into an unforgettable duel. This interactivity gave the players a sense of starring in their own action movie, something that was rare in 2005. Boss fights were larger than life, each one designed to push both the mechanics and the tension to new extremes. The lake monster Delago forced players to harpoon from a tiny boat, every miss leaving you vulnerable as the beast circled and lunged. It was a spectacle that showcased the game's sense of scale, making you feel small and powerless in the face of nature warped by the Plagas parasite. El Gigante towered over Leon, demanding precision, spatial awareness, and crowd control skills in wide-open arenas where panic could easily lead to death. And then there were the nightmare-fueled creatures, like the Regenerators, whose weaving breaths still haunt players to this day. Their near invulnerability without a thermal scope added a layer of helplessness, making every encounter feel like a horror movie sequence where the monster just won't die. Ashley's escort sections drew criticism, but they served their purpose in shaping the game's tension. Suddenly, it wasn't just about Leon surviving, it was about protecting someone else, someone fragile and vulnerable in a world designed to crush the unprepared. Every shout of
Help me, Leon! Help!
added tension, forcing players to balance combat with defense while planning routes and strategies on the fly. Most players find this annoying, which in all honesty it is, but if you're hearing Ashley call out for you, it's your fault. Her presence meant you couldn't play recklessly. Recklessness put her at risk. It was also a clever way to shift the pace, making players more cautious and heightening the emotional stakes of Leon's mission. If Ashley starts yelling, you have to drop everything and go rescue her. There's also, spots for her to hide in so you could clear an area without having to worry about her. Ashley wasn't just cargo to babysit. She was the human element that made the survival horror feel personal. And while Resident Evil 4 may have revolutionized survival horror, it never took itself too seriously, and like I said, that's part of the charm. Between the campy one-liners like,
Where's everyone going? Bingo?
Leon's impossibly stylish suplexes, and even his insane backflip through lasers, the game balanced its tension with a wink at the player. The villains leaned into theatrical exaggeration, from Salazar's pint-sized arrogance to Sadler's cult leader pomposity, each one chewing scenery like they knew they were in a B-movie. Even Ashley's clumsy Leon catch me moments added to the tongue-in-cheek vibe. This mix of genuine terror and pulpy absurdity gave Resident Evil 4 a unique personality, scary when it needed to be, but never afraid to laugh at itself. Yet at the same time, Resident Evil 4 was very divisive among hardcore fans. For some, it strayed too far from the series' slow-burn survival horror roots. The claustrophobic mansions and intricate puzzles gave way to faster gunplay, larger environments, and bombastic set pieces that felt closer to an action movie than traditional survival horror. For longtime players, the shift risked diluting the identity of Resident Evil, turning it into something unrecognizable. But for many, that very change was exactly what the franchise needed to stay relevant in a gaming landscape that was quickly evolving. By reinventing itself, Resident Evil 4 opened the door to a new audience while still keeping just enough of its horror DNA to satisfy curious veterans. What no one could deny was its craftsmanship, the pacing, the encounter design, the balance between exploration and combat, all of it showed a level of polish few games could match. Every encounter felt handcrafted, from the way enemies flanked and pressured you to deliberate rationing of ammo and healing items. Even small details like the weighty feel of guns or the tension of hearing distant enemies before spotting them reflected Capcom's obsessive design philosophy. Resident Evil 4 wasn't just a game, it was a masterclass in how to evolve a series without losing its soul. But that tension between old and new would shape the series for years to come. Resident Evil 5 and 6 doubled down on the action-heavy formula, embracing co-op, quick-time spectacle, and blockbuster pacing, but in the process, they lost much of the eerie atmosphere that once defined the franchise. The pendulum swung too far, and many fans longed for the slower, more oppressive dread of the earlier entries. It wasn't until Resident Evil 7 that Capcom returned to its horror roots, proving that the DNA of the old series could still thrive in a new form. In hindsight, Resident Evil 4 wasn't just a turning point, it was the spark that ignited an identity crisis the franchise is still wrestling with today. After its GameCube debut, Resident Evil 4 became one of the most ported games of all time. Like, literally, it's on everything. Each port introduced it to new players, and somehow the game always held up. And then came 2023's Resident Evil 4 Remake. More than a simple facelift, it reimagined the original with expanded storylines, modern mechanics, and a darker, more grounded tone, while still honoring the spirit of the 2005 classic. The remake wasn't just about higher fidelity visuals, it was about recontextualizing a beloved game for a modern audience without stripping away what made it iconic in the first place. From reworked character arcs that gave more depth to figures like Ashley and Luis, to redefined controls that match today's standards while keeping the deliberate tension intact, the remake proved that Resident Evil 4 could evolve without losing its soul. Nearly 2 decades later, Resident Evil 4 still stands tall. It's more than just a great game. It's a turning point, a bridge between old-school survival horror and modern cinematic action. Few titles can claim to have changed the industry. Fewer still remain just as fun to play today. Its influence can be felt in nearly every third-person action game that followed, from the way that developers design camera systems to how they balance tension and spectacle. Even outside the survival horror genre, RE4's fingerprints are everywhere. Shinji Mikami once said he wanted Resident Evil 4 to blow players' minds, and judging by its enduring legacy, it's safe to say he succeeded. Not only did it redefine what Resident Evil could be, it reshaped what video games as a medium could achieve, blending cinematic presentation, innovative mechanics, and relentless pacing into a package that has never truly gone out of style. I adore this game with all my heart. It truly blew my mind as a kid, and it still blows my mind today, 14 years after I first played it. Whether you revisit the 2005 original or its modern remake, one truth remains. Resident Evil 4 isn't just a classic, it's timeless. Thank you for watching this retrospective. What's your favorite memory of Resident Evil 4? Let me know in the comments, and if you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing for more dives into gaming history. That's all. See ya.